Bullies target new black cheerleader. They have no idea. Her father is a Navy SEAL. Jamila had been counting down the days for this moment. The first day of her senior year. The nerves were there, of course. New school, new faces, new challenges. But this time Jamila was ready. She was determined to face everything head on. She had worked hard to get here, and she wasn't going to let anyone or anything get in her way. She had always been different from the others. Growing up in a small town, she had faced her share of struggles. Being one of the few black students in a predominantly white school had never been easy. There were whispers behind her back, stares when she walked into the room, and the occasional comment that cut deep. But Jamila was used to it. Her father had always taught her that resilience was the key to survival. Her father, a Navy SEAL, had instilled a sense of duty and strength in her from a young age. "Never let anyone break your spirit, Jamila," he would say. "You have the power to overcome anything, no matter what." As she walked through the halls of Westbrook High, Jamila held her head high. She felt the eyes on her, but she wasn't intimidated. She had done this before. She knew how to handle it. But today it was different. Today she was determined to take her place. Jamila had recently made the cheerleading team, something she had dreamed about for years. She had always admired the cheerleaders, their grace and their confidence. But she knew it wouldn't be easy. She had seen how the other girls looked at her when she first joined the team. Some of them were welcoming, but others, they weren't so sure about having a new girl, especially one who didn't look like the others. Her first practice had been tough. The girls on the team were skilled, and Jamila struggled to keep up. She was determined, though. Every move, every routine she practiced until she got it right. Her body ached from the effort, but she didn't give up. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Push harder. Be stronger. You're capable of more than you think." But the teasing had started almost immediately. At first it was small things. Snide remarks behind her back, the way they would look at her during practice as if they were judging every move she made. Stacy, the team captain, was the worst of them all. She would often make little comments like, "You're not exactly what we were expecting, are you? Or do you even know what you're doing?" Her words stung, but Jamila kept her chin up. She had learned long ago not to let others' negativity define her. Still, it wasn't easy. The other cheerleaders would laugh when Jamila stumbled during a routine. They would roll their eyes when she tried to join in with the cheers. Jamila could feel their eyes on her, could sense the judgment in the air. It was hard not to feel self-conscious. But she had her pride, and that pride came from a place much stronger than any ridicule. Her father had taught her to be a fighter. Every day was a battle, and she had to be ready to face it. She had seen her father come home battered and bruised from his missions, yet never once did he complain. He had learned to face the hardest challenges with a calm resolve. "You're a warrior, Jamila," he would tell her. Warriors never give up. That evening, after her first practice, Jamila sat in her room and reflected on the day. Her mind replayed the taunts, the sneers, and the moments of doubt that had crept in. For a brief second, she wondered if it was worth it, if she should just quit and forget about the cheerleading dream. But then she remembered her father's words. "You're stronger than they know." Jamila shook her head, pushing the doubt aside. No, she wouldn't quit. She couldn't. She had worked too hard for this. She had made it to this point, and she wasn't about to back down now. The next day, Jamila walked into school with a renewed sense of purpose. She refused to let the negativity get to her. She had a goal, and no one was going to stop her. The moment she entered the gym, she could feel the eyes on her again. She could hear the whispers. Stacy was at the front, chatting with some of the other girls. Jamila steeled herself. Today was a new day. During practice, Stacy's mocking glances and comments came as expected. "You're not even close to keeping up with the routine, Jamila," Stacy sneered. "Maybe you should just sit out and let the real cheerleaders handle it." The other girls giggled, but Jamila didn't flinch. She kept her focus. She didn't respond. Instead, she gave the routine everything she had. She pushed herself harder, focusing on her movements, her form, and her strength. The harder she worked, the more determined she became. With every step, with every cheer, Jamila could feel her confidence growing. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for every person who had ever doubted her. Stacy noticed her persistence. The smiles faded from the other girls' faces as they watched Jamila give everything she had. It wasn't just the routine. It was the power in Jamila's eyes, the fire that had been kindled within her. Stacy didn't like it. She didn't like the fact that Jamila was starting to win over the team. "You think you belong here?" Stacy asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're nothing like the rest of us," Jamila didn't answer. Instead, she focused on the next move, determined not to let Stacy's words get to her. She knew she was different, and she knew it didn't matter. What mattered was the strength she carried inside, a strength that could never be taken away. As practice ended, Stacy walked over to Jamila, her face twisted in annoyance. "You're still not good enough," she said under her breath, as if she thought Jamila wouldn't hear. "You'll never fit in here." Jamila turned to face her. The weight of her father's lessons filled her chest. "You're wrong," Jamila replied quietly. "I don't need to fit in. I just need to be myself." The words were simple, but they carried a truth that Stacy couldn't ignore. For the first time, Stacy seemed unsure of herself. She walked away, her confidence shattered. Jamila, however, stood tall. She had found her voice, and it was louder than any of the doubts that had ever been cast her way. The next few days felt like an endless cycle of practice, mockery, and silent determination. Jamila could feel the tension growing with every encounter. Stacy's taunts grew sharper, her insults more biting. "Are you really going to keep up with this, Jamila?" She sneered during practice. "This isn't for you. This is for the girls who know what they're doing." Every word cut deep, but Jamila kept her head down. She was starting to wonder if she was cut out for this after all. But there was something inside her that refused to let it go. It was as if a spark had been lit within her, a fire that wasn't about to be extinguished. She had been pushed to her limits before, by the world, by herself, and by others who told her she couldn't. But this time was different. Jamila wasn't the same girl who had walked onto the practice field that first day. The girl who had been quiet, unsure, and afraid of confrontation was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who wasn't afraid to fight for what she deserved. One afternoon, as the team gathered in the gym to rehearse their routine for the big game, Jamila overheard a conversation between Stacy and the other girls. "She's hopeless," Stacy whispered. "I don't know why coach even let her on the team. She's only here because of a diversity quota." Jamila's heart sank. The word stung more than anything the girls had said to her before. Diversity quota? She wasn't here because she deserved it. She was here because of some box that needed to be checked. The thought consumed her, and for the first time in weeks, Jamila felt the weight of doubt pressing down on her chest. Was that all she was, a token? She tried to shake it off. She had earned her place on the team. She knew it. But the hurt lingered. Her next practice was a quiet one. Jamila could feel the weight of the other girls' eyes on her as she moved through the routine. They were waiting for her to mess up, for her to stumble, to give them a reason to keep mocking her. But Jamila refused to let that happen. Each step she took, each cheer she gave, she focused entirely on herself. She wouldn't give Stacy the satisfaction of seeing her doubt herself, but the pressure was real. Every move, every cheer, every part of the routine felt like a battle. The other girls looked at her with skeptical eyes, as if waiting for her to slip up, to prove their assumptions right. And then it happened. She missed a step. She stumbled on the floor, her foot catching the wrong way, and in an instant she was on the ground. The gym was silent for a moment, and Jamila felt every set of eyes turn towards her, their judgment sharp and cold. Stacy was the first to speak. "Told you," she muttered under her breath. The other girls giggled. "You just don't belong here." Jamila's heart pounded in her chest, and for a brief moment it felt like everything had come crashing down. But then she remembered something, her father. His voice echoed in her mind. "When you fall, Jamila, it's not about how hard you hit the ground. It's about how quickly you get back up." With a deep breath, Jamila stood up. The room seemed to hold its breath as she dusted herself off. "I'm not done yet," she said, her voice steady and firm. The other girls were stunned. They weren't used to Jamila speaking up like this. They expected her to shrink back, to apologize, to beg for their forgiveness. But that wasn't going to happen. The next time they went into practice, Jamila was determined to show them what she was made of. She pushed through every move, every cheer, every routine, with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. Every time Stacy tried to belittle her, Jamila responded with a smile, a wink, and a cheer louder than ever before. "Is that all you've got?" Jamila taunted. "You're going to have to do better than that." The other girls started to take notice. It wasn't just about how well Jamila could cheer. It was about her tenacity, her resolve, and her refusal to let anyone break her. And that's when things started to shift. At first, Stacy and the other cheerleaders couldn't believe what they were seeing. Every taunt, every insult they threw at Jamila only seemed to make her stronger. They could see it in the way she moved. There was a quiet confidence in her now, a presence that they hadn't seen before. Her posture was straighter, her movements sharper, and her energy contagious. Stacy couldn't stand it. She had been the queen bee of the team for as long as she could remember, and Jamila's growing strength was starting to threaten that. "What's your deal, Jamila?" Stacy asked one day during practice, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you honestly think you're good enough to be on this team?" Jamila looked Stacy in the eye, her expression calm but resolute. "You think I'm not good enough?" she asked. "I'm exactly where I need to be, and I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, Stacy was silent, her face flushed with frustration. The other girls looked at each other, unsure of what to say. They had all seen the way Jamila had pushed through the tough moments, the way she had fought for her place on the team. It was hard to argue with someone who had so much heart. The practice continued, and as the weeks went on, Jamila's strength became undeniable. She wasn't just keeping up with the team, she was outshining them. Her enthusiasm, her perseverance, and her passion were contagious. The team began to warm up to her, and the once loud whispers about her being the outsider began to fade away. One day, as the team gathered in the locker room after practice, Jamila overheard a conversation between some of the girls. "I was wrong about her," one of the cheerleaders said. "She's actually really good." "I didn't expect that." Another girl nodded in agreement. "She's tough. I respect that." Jamila smiled to herself, the weight of the past weeks beginning to lift. For the first time since she had joined the team, she felt like she truly belonged. The bullies who had once tried to tear her down were now starting to see her for who she really was. Not just a cheerleader, but a fighter. As she walked out of the locker room, Jamila could feel the eyes on her again. But this time they weren't filled with mockery. They were filled with something else. Respect. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Jamila. The sting of her earlier embarrassment had begun to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of determination. She wasn't just going to prove herself to Stacy and the other cheerleaders. She was going to prove it to herself. Jamila had always been resilient, but now she felt something deeper inside her. A quiet strength like a fire that had been burning in the background suddenly ignited. This was her moment. She wasn't about to let anyone, not even Stacy, tell her what she was capable of. The next cheerleading practice was unlike anything the team had seen before. Jamila had come prepared. She didn't just show up to go through the motions. She came to lead. She could feel the eyes of the other girls on her, but this time it didn't faze her. In fact, she welcomed it. She had something to prove, and she wasn't going to let a single moment pass without showing just how far she'd come. It started with the basics: footwork, timing, cheers. But it quickly escalated. The routine was tough, and Jamila knew it would be a challenge. The other cheerleaders were still unsure of her, still skeptical about whether she truly belonged. But Jamila knew she had to give it her all. She threw herself into every jump, every twist, every leap, as if this was her chance to leave it all on the floor. At first, the girls weren't impressed. Stacy, as usual, had a sneer on her face. Jamila could feel her watching, waiting for her to mess up again, but Jamila refused to let that happen. Instead, she focused. She blocked out the noise, the doubts, the whispers that tried to seep into her mind. She focused only on the movement, on the rhythm, on the cheer that had always been part of her. She felt the music in her bones, and it fueled her. As the practice wore on, something unexpected happened. The other girls started to take notice. At first it was subtle, a glance here, a raised eyebrow there. But then something shifted. Jamila was no longer just the new girl who had stumbled through her routines. She was an asset. She was strong, she was determined, and she was winning them over. Jamila could see it in the way they looked at her now. It wasn't mockery in their eyes anymore, it was respect. The same girls who had laughed at her, who had made fun of her from the sidelines, were now watching her closely, taking mental notes. They could see the power in her movements, the confidence in her step, and the way she never gave up, no matter how tough things got. Then came the moment that changed everything. The team was rehearsing for an upcoming game, and the routine was more difficult than anything they had practiced before. Stacy was at the front, leading the team as usual, but Jamila could tell she was holding back. It wasn't that Stacy wasn't capable. It was that she was beginning to see Jamila as a threat. The more Jamila excelled, the more Stacy's sense of control over the team slipped away. When it came time for Jamila to take the lead in a difficult sequence of moves, Stacy hesitated. She looked at Jamila as if waiting for her to fail. Jamila didn't back down. She took her place at the front, leading the cheer with precision and grace. The room seemed to hold its breath as she executed each move flawlessly. Every jump, every spin, every flip she did was perfect. It wasn't just the skill, it was the power. Jamila wasn't just performing the routine. She was owning it. Her movements were sharp and fierce, and her presence was undeniable. The entire team stopped for a moment to watch her. The atmosphere in the gym had shifted. It wasn't just about cheerleading anymore. It was about dominance, strength, and the refusal to be anything less than her best. For the first time, Stacy stepped back. She didn't say anything, but her face betrayed a mixture of surprise and frustration. She had never seen Jamila like this before. This wasn't the same quiet, uncertain girl who had struggled to keep up at practice. This was someone else entirely, someone who was powerful and in control. The next few days were filled with a kind of quiet tension. Jamila could feel the shift in the team's energy. Some of the other girls were warming up to her, while others were still hesitant. But Jamila wasn't concerned with them anymore. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to do what she loved and show everyone that she belonged. As the game day drew closer, Jamila found herself preparing in a way she hadn't before. It wasn't just about the routine or the cheers. It was about everything that had led her here. Every doubt she had ever faced, every insult, every tear, every moment of pain had led to this. She wasn't just representing herself. She was representing every person who had ever been told they couldn't do something, every person who had been overlooked or underestimated. Her father's lessons ran through her mind like a constant drumbeat. "You don't need anyone's approval, Jamila," he had told her countless times. "Your strength doesn't come from them, it comes from you. You've got everything you need inside you. Don't forget that." On the morning of the game, Jamila woke up feeling more determined than ever. She didn't know what the day would bring, but she knew she was ready. She put on her uniform, tied her sneakers tight, and looked in the mirror. The girl staring back at her wasn't the same girl who had been nervous and unsure on the first day of practice. She was a warrior now, ready to face whatever came her way. The game was intense, and the cheerleading performance that followed was even more so. As Jamila stepped out onto the field with the rest of the team, she could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. This was her chance to show everyone just who she was. She wasn't going to back down, not this time. The cheers started, and Jamila led the team with an energy that was unstoppable. Each movement was executed with precision, each cheer was louder than the last, and the crowd responded with enthusiasm. Jamila felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, but more than that, she felt the sense of pride that came from knowing she had earned her place. As the performance ended, the crowd erupted into applause. Jamila felt the rush of victory in her chest, but it wasn't just about the cheers. It was about everything that had led her here. The struggles, the triumphs, the moments of doubt, and the moments of strength. She had done it. She had proved that she belonged. And more than that, she had proven to herself that no one could ever take that away from her. As Jamila walked off the field after the game, the roar of the crowd still echoing in her ears, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. It wasn't the applause that fueled her, though that did feel good. It was the realization that she had proven something far more important. She had proven that she belonged not just to the team but to herself. For the first time in her life, she felt unstoppable, but the victory, though sweet, was fleeting. The days following the game brought with them a new challenge. While some of her teammates had started to warm up to her, others still harbored a quiet resentment led by Stacy. Jamila could feel it every time she walked into the gym. Those lingering glances, the whispered conversations. The old fears crept back in. Had she really earned their respect, or had they just let her have her moment because they had no choice? The team had another big event coming up, the regional cheerleading competition. It was an important one. If they performed well, they could qualify for nationals, something that had never happened in the school's history. The pressure was mounting, and Jamila knew it. She could feel it in the way the other girls practiced, in the way the coach's eyes darted nervously between them. Everyone was counting on them to perform flawlessly, and it was clear that Stacy felt the weight of that pressure most of all. In the days leading up to the competition, Stacy began to show her true colors. Her attempts to undermine Jamila had become more direct. At practice, Stacy would make comments like, "You're not ready for this level. You'll just slow us down." Or, "Why don't you just watch from the sidelines this time? Give someone else a chance." Each word stung, but Jamila was no longer the girl who would retreat in the face of adversity. She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she kept her head down and focused on the task at hand, her mind set on the routine that lay ahead. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling practice session, Stacy pulled Jamila aside. There was a sharp edge to her voice that wasn't there before. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Just because you led the team once doesn't mean you're irreplaceable. Don't forget that." Jamila stood her ground. She could feel the fire inside her starting to burn again, not in anger but in clarity. She had been through too much to let anyone push her around now. "I'm not trying to be a hero, Stacy," Jamila replied quietly. "I'm just here to do my part. I've earned my place on this team and I'm not going anywhere." For a moment there was silence between them, a heavy tension in the air. Then Stacy sneered, "We'll see about that." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Jamila standing alone in the middle of the gym. That night, Jamila couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of the competition. She knew what was at stake. This was her moment, not just for the team, but for herself. She needed to perform well, not just to prove Stacy wrong, but to show everyone, including herself, that she had what it took to stand tall in the face of adversity. The next morning, Jamila woke up early, determined to prepare herself. She practiced her routine in front of the mirror, focusing on every movement, every gesture. She didn't want to just be good, she wanted to be perfect. The mirror reflected her back, strong, focused, and unshakable. There was no room for doubt anymore. As the day of the competition approached, the tension within the team grew thicker. Jamila could feel the change in the air as the girls practiced harder than ever before. But there was something different now. Instead of a sense of competition, there was a quiet sense of unity, and it started with Jamila. Her determination to give her best had inspired the others. They saw the way she had risen above the petty gossip, the way she had kept her focus even when things got tough. Slowly, they began to follow her lead. The day of the competition arrived, and Jamila felt the weight of it all. The stadium was filled with cheering crowds, the air thick with anticipation. It was the kind of environment where everything mattered. The smallest mistake could cost them a win. But Jamila wasn't intimidated. She had been through worse. She had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, and she had come out stronger on the other side. This was no different. Backstage, Jamila stood in front of the mirror, trying to calm her nerves. The other girls were pacing, adjusting their uniforms, running through last-minute stretches. Stacy was there too, but Jamila noticed something in her expression. There was no longer the smug arrogance that had once been there. There was only silence, uncertainty. It was clear that the pressure was getting to her. Jamila felt a small spark of sympathy. She didn't want Stacy to fail. She just wanted the team to succeed together. The moment they walked onto the floor, Jamila felt it, the electricity in the air. The crowd was roaring, the lights blinding, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was the routine. All that mattered was the next cheer, the next jump, the next move. Jamila blocked everything out, focusing only on her teammates and the rhythm of the cheer. And then they began. The routine was flawless. Every jump, every spin, every tumble was executed perfectly. Jamila led them through it, and the team followed her with precision. They were in sync, not just as cheerleaders, but as a unit, a family working together toward the same goal. Jamila's movements were smooth and powerful, her energy infectious. It wasn't just about the routine, it was about the spirit she brought to the floor. The other girls fed off her energy, and together they created something that could not be denied. Stacy was no longer the center of attention. Jamila was. When the routine ended, the gym exploded into applause. The team stood in a line, hands on their hips, their chests puffed with pride. Jamila looked out into the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. They had done it. This was the moment she had worked for, the moment that proved to everyone, most importantly to herself, that she had a place on this team. And that place was earned. As the judges tallied the scores, Jamila felt a deep sense of pride. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about everything she had gone through to get here. She had faced her fears, fought through her doubts, and proved that no one could hold her back. She was stronger than she had ever been before. And then the announcement came. The team had won. They had qualified for nationals. The other girls screamed with joy, and Jamila felt her heart swell with pride. But it wasn't just the win that mattered, it was the journey. She had made it. Not just for the team, but for herself. And nothing, no one, could ever take that away from her. The win at the regional competition sent waves of excitement through the cheerleading team. But for Jamila, it wasn't just the victory that mattered. It was the transformation, the moment when everything changed for her. The other girls, once her critics, were now her allies. They looked at her differently, no longer seeing her as an outsider but as an essential part of the team. But the true challenge, Jamila knew, was still ahead. National championships were in just a few weeks, and the pressure was already mounting. The stakes were higher than ever before. This wasn't just a competition. It was the chance for the team to make history. Jamila felt it too. The weight of expectation pressed on her shoulders, but this time it didn't scare her. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The team's training intensified, and so did the tension. Stacy, though she had been quieter lately, was still the team captain. While she had accepted Jamila's presence on the team, there was a lingering edge to her demeanor. Stacy still saw herself as the leader, the one who called the shots, and Jamila knew that would be something she would have to face head-on. One evening, after a particularly grueling practice session, Jamila sat alone in the locker room, her muscles aching and her mind tired. The girls were still talking about their routine, reviewing every move, every cheer, every transition. Jamila's heart was in it, but there was something else. A voice in the back of her mind telling her that she hadn't done enough yet. She needed to be better. She needed to do more. As she sat in the silence, she reflected on how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she had been an outsider, unsure of her place. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and rejection, but she had pushed through it all, and now she was one of the team's key players. But as the competition neared, she felt a growing pressure to live up to the expectations she had set for herself. What if she wasn't enough? What if her best wasn't good enough to carry the team to victory? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was Stacy, standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Stacy spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "You did good out there today," Stacy said, her eyes avoiding Jamila's. "I know I've been hard on you, and I just wanted to say you've earned your spot on this team." Jamila didn't know what to say at first. She had expected the usual passive-aggressive comment, the usual judgment. But this was different. It took a moment for the words to sink in, but when they did, Jamila couldn't help but smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "That means a lot." Stacy nodded, almost as if embarrassed. "You've worked hard. I see that now." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "It's not easy being the captain. I've always been the one they look up to, the one they expect to lead. But I guess you're a leader too, Jamila, in your own way." For a brief moment, Jamila saw a flicker of vulnerability in Stacy's eyes, a glimpse of the girl behind the confident, competitive exterior. It was a rare moment, one Jamila hadn't expected. She realized then that Stacy wasn't just a bully. She was a person too, with her own struggles, her own insecurities, and maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter for both of them. "I'm not trying to replace you, Stacy," Jamila said softly, her tone sincere. "I'm just trying to be the best version of myself. And if that helps the team, then I'm happy with that." Stacy looked at Jamila for a long moment as if weighing her words. Then without another word, she left the room, leaving Jamila with a sense of quiet accomplishment. For the first time, Jamila didn't feel like she was fighting for approval. She wasn't trying to be anyone else. She was just being herself, and that in itself was enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of practices, team meetings, and strategy sessions. With each passing day, the competition loomed larger, the stakes higher. But Jamila felt something shift in the air. The team was no longer just a group of individuals trying to outperform each other. They were starting to come together, to trust one another in ways they hadn't before. Stacy's leadership had softened, and Jamila's influence had grown. There was a new sense of unity, of shared purpose, and it was palpable. On the night before the competition, the team gathered for one final meeting. It was a tradition to have a pep talk before the big day, and tonight it felt especially important. The gym was quiet as the girls sat in a circle, their uniforms neatly pressed, their hair tied back, ready for the moment they had all worked so hard for. Coach Daniels stood in front of them, his expression serious but proud. Tomorrow you will face the biggest challenge of your lives. This isn't just about cheerleading. This is about showing the world who you are, what you fought for, and why you deserve to be here. You've worked hard. You've given everything you've got, and now it's time to leave it all on the floor. Jamila could feel the energy in the room, the weight of the moment settling in. The girls were nervous, but they were also ready. She knew they had the strength to do this. More than that, they had the heart. Remember, it's not about who leads or who follows, Coach Daniels continued. It's about what you do as a team. Together, you're unstoppable. Now let's make history. The team cheered, their voices unified. For the first time, Jamila felt completely at peace. Tomorrow, they would compete as a family, not just as a cheerleading team. And whatever happened, she knew they had already won in their own way. The next day, as the competition began, Jamila stood at the edge of the stage with her teammates. The bright lights of the stadium shone down on them, the noise of the crowd filling the air. It was overwhelming, but Jamila took a deep breath and centered herself. She looked at the girls around her, saw the confidence in their eyes, and felt the bond they shared. This was their moment. This was their time. As the music began, Jamila led the team with every ounce of strength and passion she had. The routine was flawless, the movements sharp and synchronized. The crowd roared with approval, and Jamila felt the energy of the room surge through her. This was what it was all about, the unity, the determination, the relentless drive to be the best version of themselves. When the routine ended, the team stood in a line, their heads held high, their chests puffed with pride. The crowd erupted into applause, and Jamila couldn't help but smile. They had done it. They had given it everything they had, and now there was no turning back. The weeks after the national competition passed in a blur. Jamila could hardly believe it when they were announced as champions, the culmination of their hard work and perseverance. It was a victory that went beyond the cheerleading floor. It was about every challenge, every tear, every moment of doubt that had been overcome. It wasn't just the team's triumph, it was Jamila's. It was her victory, not just as a cheerleader, but as a young woman who had fought to be seen, to be heard, and to be respected. But even with the trophy in hand, Jamila knew that her journey wasn't over. She had changed, but there were still new battles to face. She had earned her place on the team, but now she had to decide what that place meant. The truth was, her time at Westbrook High was coming to an end. The road ahead was uncertain. There were colleges to consider, career paths to think about, and the looming question of where she truly belonged. One afternoon, a few days after the competition, Jamila found herself sitting in the bleachers of the gym, staring out at the empty court. The silence of the room felt heavier than usual. Her teammates had gone home for the day, but Jamila had stayed behind. She needed time to process everything, to understand what this victory meant for her future. As she sat there, a familiar voice broke the stillness. "Mind if I join you?" It was Stacy, her expression more thoughtful than usual. Jamila nodded and scooted over, making room for her. For the first time since the regional competition, Jamila felt like she was finally seeing Stacy as someone she could relate to. The bitterness and rivalry that had once marked their interactions had faded into something more subtle, something resembling mutual understanding. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Stacy seemed to be lost in her own thoughts, staring out at the empty floor just like Jamila had been. Eventually, it was Stacy who broke the silence. "Jamila," she began quietly, her voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking. I don't know if I ever really said this to you, but I'm sorry. I was jealous. I didn't want to admit it, but I was. I've always had to be the best, and when you came in, it felt like everything I worked for was being challenged. But what I realized is that maybe that's not such a bad thing." Jamila was taken aback. She hadn't expected an apology, and certainly not from Stacy. For a moment, she wasn't sure how to respond. But then she realized that Stacy wasn't the enemy anymore. She was just another person trying to find her way. "It's okay," Jamila said softly. "I get it. I've been there, feeling like I had to prove something, feeling like I wasn't enough. But I've learned that it's not about being the best, not really. It's about being true to who you are, no matter what anyone else thinks. We're all capable of more than we know, Stacy. And it's not about fighting to be the top. It's about supporting each other along the way. Stacy looked at her, the corners of her mouth turning upward in the slightest of smiles. I guess I've got a lot to learn, she admitted. I've been so focused on being the best that I never realized how much strength there is in letting others shine too. Jamila nodded, understanding. We're stronger together. That's what makes the team work. If we push each other up instead of tearing each other down, we can do anything. For the first time, Jamila saw a glimpse of the person Stacy could be. A leader who wasn't afraid to share the spotlight. A teammate who didn't see success as a competition, but as a shared victory. In that moment, something shifted between them. The tension that had existed for so long, the unspoken animosity, seemed to dissolve into something more productive. They were no longer rivals. They were teammates, and for Jamila, that realization was a quiet victory in itself. The rest of the school year passed quickly. Jamila continued to excel not just in cheerleading, but in her studies and personal growth. She became a role model to others. Students who had once seen her as an outsider now turned to her for advice and support. She was no longer the quiet girl who had to prove herself. She was the confident young woman who had earned her place, and her influence was beginning to spread beyond the cheerleading team. Her relationship with her father deepened as well. He had always been her biggest supporter, the one who had pushed her to be her best. But now Jamila was starting to see him not just as her father, but as a mentor, someone who had faced countless challenges of his own, and had still managed to rise above them. They would talk for hours about life, about strength, and about resilience. And Jamila realized that she was learning not just from his words, but from his example. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of their home, her father looked at her with pride in his eyes. "You've done well, Jamila," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've become the woman I always knew you could be. Strong, capable, and compassionate. You've proven to the world and to yourself that you don't need anyone's approval to succeed." Jamila smiled, feeling the warmth of his words settle deep within her. "Thanks, Dad," she replied softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." As graduation day approached, Jamila found herself standing at the crossroads of her life. She had accomplished so much, won the national championship, earned the respect of her peers, and, most importantly, discovered her own strength. But now she had to decide what came next. College, a career? The world was wide open, and for the first time Jamila felt truly ready to face whatever lay ahead. On graduation day, as Jamila stood in her cap and gown, ready to walk across the stage and receive her diploma, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. This was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another. She had worked hard for everything she had achieved, but now it was time to take that strength, that resilience, and apply it to the next challenge. As she walked across the stage, her eyes met Stacy's in the crowd. Stacy gave her a nod of acknowledgement, a silent recognition of the journey they had both been on. It was the first time they had truly understood each other. Jamila took a deep breath, ready for the next step. She had come a long way from the shy, uncertain girl who had first stepped onto that gym floor, and now she was ready for whatever the future held. The world was hers for the taking. Graduation day came and went, a blur of excitement, speeches, and goodbyes. The heavy weight of the past few years seemed to lift from Jamila's shoulders as she stood with her classmates, receiving her diploma. She had made it. She had conquered not only her fears, but the challenges of being an outsider in a place that never quite felt like home. She had earned her place, her respect, and more importantly, she had found her own voice. As Jamila stepped off the stage, the applause still ringing in her ears, she looked out into the crowd. Her father, standing with her mother, waved proudly. There was no doubt in Jamila's mind now. This was her moment. She had not only done it for herself, but for her family, her teammates, and for every person who had ever doubted her. The road to this day had been long and filled with obstacles, but with each one, Jamila had learned something new about herself, something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. But now, as the adrenaline of graduation faded, Jamila realized that the real work had only just begun. She had a future to build, and she knew it wouldn't be easy. It was time to take everything she had learned from high school, the strength, the resilience, the belief in herself, and apply it to the next chapter of her life. Jamila had been accepted to several colleges, but she hadn't made a decision yet. Her heart told her that she wanted more than just an education. She wanted to continue her journey, to challenge herself in ways she hadn't before. She had always loved cheerleading, but she knew it wasn't the only path for her. She had dreams of becoming a leader, of making an impact, of using her experiences to help others who had been in her shoes. Her father had always told her that the key to life was to never stop learning, never stop pushing forward, and never let anyone or anything hold you back. And that was exactly what she intended to do. But the uncertainty of the future still lingered in the back of her mind. Could she live up to her own expectations? Could she continue to succeed in the face of unknown challenges? One evening, as Jamila sat in her room, surrounded by acceptance letters and brochures from various colleges, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Stacy, of all people. They hadn't spoken much since graduation day, but something about this message caught Jamila's attention. "Hey, Jamila, can we talk? I think you'll want to hear this." Jamila stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to think, but curiosity got the best of her. She quickly texted back. "Sure, what's up?" Stacy responded almost immediately. "I know we've had our differences, but I wanted to let you know that I've been accepted into the same college as you. And I think you should seriously consider it. It's a great opportunity, and I think it's exactly where you're meant to be." Jamila paused, processing the message. Stacy had always been the one to lead, to dominate, to be the center of attention. But here she was, reaching out to Jamila, offering advice. The old Jamila would have been hesitant, maybe even resentful. But the new Jamila saw something different. She saw a person who had grown, who had learned to step back and appreciate the strengths of others. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment to take a leap of faith. The next morning, Jamila called her parents together. She had something important to discuss. Sitting at the kitchen table, her mother and father gave her their full attention as she explained the situation. "I've been offered a spot at a few different colleges," Jamila said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But one of them stands out. It's the one Stacy is going to, and I think it might be where I need to be. I've always been a little unsure about what comes next, but I feel like this could be the next step in my journey. The thing is, I don't want to go just because she's going. I want to go because I think it's the right fit for me." Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with the kind of understanding only a parent could have. "Jamila," he said, "you've always known what's best for you. You've trusted your instincts every step of the way. Whatever you decide, we'll be here to support you." Her mother nodded in agreement, her smile warm and comforting. "We're proud of you, Jamila. You've grown into a strong, confident young woman. Whatever you choose, you'll make it work. We believe in you." Jamila's heart swelled with gratitude. She had always known that her parents had her back, but hearing them say it out loud made her feel more confident than ever. She had their support, but more than that, she had her own trust in herself. The next few days were a blur as Jamila made her decision. She decided to go to the same college as Stacy. It wasn't about following her or competing with her. It was about embracing the challenge, pushing herself to grow, and building a future for herself that was entirely her own. She knew that whatever came next, she was ready. As she packed her things and said her goodbyes, Jamila couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It had started with a girl who was afraid of being judged, of not being good enough. It had started with a series of challenges, both external and internal, that had seemed impossible to overcome. But Jamila had faced every one of them with grace, strength, and determination. She had earned her place not just in cheerleading, but in life. She had learned that true strength wasn't just about being the best. It was about pushing through the hardest moments, standing tall when everyone else told you to sit down, and believing in yourself even when the world didn't. It was about showing up every day and doing the work. It was about embracing your flaws, your mistakes, and using them to fuel your growth. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Jamila was excited about the future. She knew it wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready. She had everything she needed to succeed. She had her heart, her mind, and her unshakable belief in herself. And as she stepped out into the world, ready for whatever came next, Jamila knew one thing for certain. She had finally become the person she was always meant to be.